Okay, good morning, everybody. And we'll get started here. We're in Judges chapter 15, and we want to start with verse 14 as we talk about Samson's killing spree. He went on a killing spree, and we started that last week, and we want to finish up on today. Let me do a few housekeeping things. Sister Deborah Rice had a procedure on yesterday, and she's going to take it easy for the next few days, but let's keep her in our prayers. Also, I want to remind everybody that it's just around the corner. November 12th is the drive-through Thanksgiving baskets. It's called Shared Blessings, but we give away Thanksgiving baskets and asking members to bring the items that go into the basket. Keep in mind our evangelistic thrust. We always have an evangelistic thrust at Arlington Road, and there's several techniques, approaches that we can use. I sent a text to some of us, and hopefully it'll get around to others about a technique that can be used. Let me see if I can find it on my phone. And it's just a real inobtrusive way to share things with others. I don't think I can find it. I must have deleted it. But, and I picked this up from somebody else. A lot of things that I do are not original, and I don't mind borrowing from what other people do. But one preacher put on his Facebook post, good morning or hi, like to invite you to our worship service tomorrow. And he said, just something that basic and that simple, good morning, hi, I'd like to invite you to our worship service this morning. And it was a little bit more to it. And I'll try to find that text. And if you didn't get the text, let me know and we'll get it out to you. Anybody have that? Yeah, it was just a simple, hi, maybe you haven't worshiped with me in the past. Would you be my guest tomorrow? Another thing that I want to keep us in mind of is the mandate in Matthew 28, 19 and 20. And we call it the Great Commission. Jesus said, go into all the world, go and teach all nations, and baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost. The teaching scholars have said, and some mature members of church really says to make disciples. And the making of disciples actually takes place before the baptism. And I'm noticing that we're getting some visitors from the community who just come on Sunday. They just come for whatever reason they come. Well, I know the reason, but what I want to share with us is just to be mindful of the making disciple process. And one of the things that I want to share is that when you have a visitor coming on their own, let's let them come. They're coming. I mean, there's something that's drawing them to the service. And I heard one preacher say once that there was a woman who had been visiting the congregation where he preached at for months. It might have been years. And then one day she decided to get baptized. And the minister said, well, we thought you already was a member because you came so often. And then he asked, well, what took you so long? And she said, well, I was checking you out to see if you believe what you were teaching. So a lot of times people come and they're checking us out. You know, they're just watching. You know, they sit in the back and they just watch, and they just, you know, they watch how we interact with each other during the service, before the service, after the service. They listen to what's being said from the pulpit. And I think that I hope I'm not being presumptuous, but I think half the battle is won when they're coming on their own. There have been times when we baptize people and then they don't come. You know, you baptize them and you don't see them anymore. So the process of making disciples is spending time with the individual, walking them through certain processes, responding to questions that they might have. One of our visitors lives right across the street from our building. And she said that she just watches us. She's been watching us for some time. I mean, she can literally look out her door. And what that means is, what she meant by that is she see the events that we have, and she's been watching. So you never know what a person is going through, and where they are in the conversion process. You never know what God is doing with them prior to their coming here. And some people are just looking for a church home. They're looking, they really don't even know what we believe or what we teach, but they're looking for a church home. And they when they come, they want to feel it. They want to feel in the atmosphere. They want to feel at home. And I'm just really want us to park on the Matthew 28:19. As you go, make disciples, and then baptize those that you have made disciples of. And what that means is, when people come, they may not know us by name, they know us by face, but they notice us. They notice. I'm always humbled when little children, the little children, you know, they might be knee high, and the little children will kind of stand and look up at you, and then they'll call you by your name. You know, nothing melts my heart as much as a little child saying, "Hi, bro Crusoe," you know, "Hi, bro Crusoe," you know, and it's one of our young boys and his siblings or cousins. He was around his cousins, and I spoke to the girls first, and he was looking like, "Are you gonna speak to me, bro Crusoe?" You know, he said, "Hi, bro Crusoe," and what that just reminded me of, children watch us, and not only do children watch us, people just watch us, and when we're probably not even noticing or aware of the disciple making process. So let's pray that those who visit and those who are visiting regularly, you know, let them come. Just let them come. Let them keep coming. You know, I'll say this, and then we'll get to our lesson. It's like our intern, Liz, and I hope she won't mind me using her as an example, but she came here as an intern from Virginia State, and the requirements for someone to intern in our audio, visual, a social media ministry. I wasn't looking for a member of the church per se. If we had members of the church who was willing and wanted to do it, that would have been fine. But we reached out to Virginia State, and Liz responded to that. So Liz came. She came until she graduated. And, Liz would sit over there or wherever we had the camera set up. And, and she was just watching us. She was just coming. And, she was serving or working, volunteering by being involved in the social media. But I suppose she was listening to what was being said. And then this past Easter, she was one of the people who got baptized. So you never know. You never know where people are, what they're going through. You never know what God is doing with them, what is being said. But I am saying, the discipling process. Then there's the converting process where we have the one-on-one study. But it's a real good sign when people just come on their own. And so did anybody find that text? Yeah, okay. I was filibustering, giving people time to find the text. Didn't find it yet? Yeah. Oh, no, I want you to go ahead and read it, if you don't mind. Okay. So it's little things, just the invitation. Andrew brought Peter to Jesus, and he just said to his brother, "We have found the Messiah," and brought him to Jesus, and then Peter became a great apostle, great person. Also, you may not be aware of this preacher, but David Penn is a preacher out of Chicago, Illinois, and he's on the board of the National Lectureship Board of Churches of Christ. His wife had been ill, but she passed. So we want to keep Brother Penn in our prayers as well. Let's open up. That was housekeeping. Okay. Yeah.
Sunday service that all of you know, I would love to have you. We have to offer these things of perhaps you're a friend of mine, but as yet have never shared in a time of worship and praise with you. Let tomorrow be the day. God has a word for us and praise and prayer with the Lord. Service begins at 10:15 a.m. I pray you will come to you.
Okay, yeah, I think that's just so non-intrusive and just real polite, will you come and just be my visitor tomorrow? And then we'll see what the Lord does from that. Father in heaven, we come to you again, and all praises to you. You're mighty good God. We're thankful that you hear our prayers. We're thankful that you are attentive to our needs. In you, Father, we live, we move, we have our very being. We're praying for those who are ill, mindful of Sister Rice, and we pray that you'll give healing to her and comfort as she goes through this process. Bless our efforts as we try to disciple individuals, as we try to convert them to Christ. Use us in a good way to bring others to you. Give us the right words and the right posture, the right disposition, and just use us in a good way so that folk can see Christ in us. Bless us as we look at this lesson and as we try to encourage one another. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Okay, last week I had on the screen for you all Samson's killing spree, and I wasn't able to get it up this morning, but today I have it on the recording, the social media screen. One of these days we're gonna get it right, where it's on social media and it's on the platform here as well. But what we find in Judges chapter 15 is this killing spree. Chapter 15 begins with Samson returning back for his wife. This is just a review. He comes back, and Samson is expecting to be with his wife. But when he gets there, we find out that his father-in-law had given Samson's wife to another man. The father-in-law thought that Samson had divorced his wife, no longer wanted to be husband because he left. And again, when Samson left, he didn't communicate. He just left. He just left, and then he came back in a few months, but she had been given to another man. The father-in-law offered a younger daughter, and Samson refused that. But out of anger, Samson is angry, and what Samson does is he gets these, in some translations called foxes. They might be more of jackals, and then he ties the tails of the jackals, the foxes, and puts a pitcher, I guess something with fire in it, and they burn the harvest. They burn the harvest. So this is really a strategy of Samson. He knows that this is going to affect the Philistines agriculturally. Not only will it affect them agriculturally, it's going to affect them economically. And it's going to affect them. This is devastation. The Philistines, in turn, burn the father-in-law and the wife that Samson had married. Let me back up just a little bit. Samson and his wife had not consummated the marriage. Technically, Samson and the wife were married, but it had not been consummated. So Samson goes back to consummate the marriage and finds out that she had been given to someone else. But what we see is a chain of events taking place where one vengeful act after another. So Samson retaliates because Samson is embarrassed. Last week, we talked about the male ego. We want to stick on the male ego because Samson's male ego is going to cause a whole lot of problems for him. He's embarrassed, and this is not the first embarrassment that he has had at the hand of the Philistines. I'm still emphasizing, because it is connected to the narrative of this text, that Samson's first mistake began when he chose to marry a Philistine woman. In the days that we live in now, you have to be very careful how you say certain things. But there was a reason why God did not want the Hebrews or the Israelites to intermarry with other nations. It really did not have anything to do with race. Let me really make that clear, because God is not racist, and God created all nations. So I don't want us to get the impression that it's an ethnic issue, so to speak, but it's more on spiritual and religious values. God's concern had to do with salvation of the soul, and the Philistines did not worship the same God that the Hebrews worship. And that's deep, y'all. That's really, really deep. Sunday, I made a statement that as if you're single and you're looking for someone, check their resume. check the resume on the front end. If you find yourself interested in the person, you're saved, you're a Christian, you are a member of the Lord's body, and they are not. They can be a good person, but are they saved? Are they members of the body? The difficulty today, and the difficulty today is that there are good people who may not be saved people. And when I talk about saved people, I'm talking about people who share your same spiritual values. I'm talking to single people now. I'm talking to single people because you have the advantage of making the choice. And you want to enter into that marital relationship on the same page. And God knew, and no one can be smarter than God. No one can outsmart God. Am I right about it? You cannot outsmart God. You may sit there and say, Bro Crusoe, I don't want to hear that. Bro Crusoe, that don't jive with me. Bro Crusoe, what difference does it make? No one can outsmart God. So when God said for the Hebrews to marry among themselves, and even Samson's parents says, isn't there someone from our tribe or a relative? Is there a Hebrew that you can marry? What they're trying to do is keep God in the marriage. And, we don't, when young folk are in love, they don't really listen. And I don't care what you say, when they think they're in love, they forget all this Bible, they forget all the spiritual stuff. And sometimes it works out. Sometimes it seems on the surface it works out. But to single people, what I'm saying to single folk is that you want to check the resume. You want to say, do you serve God the way that I serve God? Are we on the same page on spiritual matters? To married folk, I would say just read 1 Peter 3. But Samson was a single man who decided to marry a Philistine woman. The parents did not really want that to happen. He did. He went ahead and did it anyhow. And notice, this is sort of repetitive in review, but notice his downward spiral. Samson has to make compromises because he is marrying a Philistine woman. It's a Philistine marriage feast. And keep in mind, Samson is he's just gonna continue to compromise his upbringing. And that's really what I want to talk about when we get to the jawbone in verse number 14. We're going to find that Samson is just continuing to compromise. He's reckless, he's self-centered, he's got this huge ego, and he doesn't master it, but it masters him, and he continues to make all these compromises. So let's look at verse 14, Judges chapter 15, excuse me, and verse number 14. When he came to Lehi, the Philistines met him, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon him mightily, so that the ropes that were on his arms were as flax that is burned with fire, and his bonds dropped from his hands. Doesn't make sense until I back up. After he burned the field with the jackals, and then the Philistines responded by burning his father-in-law and Samson's wife, then the Philistines want to capture Samson. They want to kill him because Samson demonstrated revenge. Now they want to demonstrate revenge. So the Philistines go to the tribe of Judah. And the tribe of Judah said, we really don't want to get involved. Life is not like it should be, but we're comfortable right now. We're under Philistine oppression, and we don't want to ruffle no feathers. Yeah, Samson was wrong, but we don't want to take sides because we just like the way it ain't the way we want it to be. But they were more afraid of the Philistines. They don't recognize that even though Samson has reckless behavior, God is going to use his recklessness to defeat the Philistine nation. So the Philistines go to the tribe of Judah and say, look, we're holding you accountable. And Samson is not a Judite. He doesn't come from the tribe of Judah. Anybody remembers what tribe he comes from? Dan. He comes from the tribe of Dan. So now, but the tribe of Judah is saying, look, you can get so comfortable even when things are not quite right. You're still comfortable. You don't want to shake the trees. You don't want to rock the boat. And so they said, well, so they went to Samson, the tribe of Judah, and I think they took 3,000 men. They took 3,000 men to confront Samson. And they told Samson, look, here's the deal. The Philistines, they want you. They want you, Samson. And Samson said, look, okay. Now, even as reckless as Samson is, you have to give Samson his props because he's reckless, but he's also brilliant in a sense. We know that he's clever because he came up with these riddles, and then he's going to come up with another poetic riddle, a poetic statement after he defeats the Philistines. So Samson says, okay, look, in Samson's mind, I believe what Samson is doing is, I understand the pressure that the Judites are under. I don't want to cause you no harm. This is my action. I'm the one that set the field on fire. Okay, I just don't want you all to kill me. Everybody read that? Y'all read the narrative? Y'all don't kill me. Y'all just tie me up. Now, can you see how clever Samson is? Samson realizes ain't no rope that they have that can contain him. He says, Samson is really, I know we like to look at the negative, and Samson's life ends negatively, but let's give him his props. Even though he was a man of faith who was not always faithful, even though he was reckless, Samson, there was something to he had a strategy. He had strategy. So Samson, they tied him up with ropes. They did not kill him. And I wonder, 3,000 to one man, Samson is probably saying, well, I'm outnumbered, but okay, y'all just tie me up. So what happens is they tied him up, but then when the Philistines came, verse 14, they shouted as they met him. In other words, they see this gigantic, he's not a giant, but they see this strong man Samson tied up. And I shouldn't say guess, look at their response. They're shouting. In other words, they didn't have to go through the trouble of capturing him. Somebody else captured him for them. Now, I'm going somewhere with this because, they're happy because Samson is tied up. I have seen people who get happy when other folk are in trouble. I've seen people literally applaud when other people seem to be under pressure. I mean, it's not Christian. You know, I'm trying to help us with a Christian perspective. You don't get happy because someone is tied up. You don't get happy because somebody has a problem. You don't get happy because somebody you know, is suffering. But these Philistines, they're just happy to see this man tied up. But watch Samson. The Spirit of the Lord came upon Samson, and it came upon him mightily, so that the ropes that were on his arms were as flax that is burned with fire, and his bonds dropped from his hands. Samson realized, in my mind, now here's Samson's faith. So I've been looking at this. As we look at this, I've been trying to figure out where does Samson's faith come in? Because we're talking about him marrying the Philistine woman. We're going to talk about him getting involved with the harlot. And then we talk about Delilah. We talk about him disobeying his parents, disrespecting his parents. Ain't no faith in none of that. I don't see faith at all in those things, but I can see faith in Samson allowing the tribe of Judah to tie him up with ropes. And then perhaps in Samson's mind, he's realizing y'all can tie me up, but God can deliver me. Everybody with me? All right, now I see some faith. I see some faith. This is not the first time that the Spirit of the Lord came mightily on Samson. So perhaps, here it comes, perhaps Samson, in his mind, the Spirit of the Lord showed up in time of need before the same God can send the same Spirit again. Now, that speaks to me. That speaks to me. That speaks to all of us, is that our faith has to be to the place or point that we remember that God can show up in our time of need. If we act properly, if we trust him, even when it seems like the world is against you, even when it seems like you're climbing uphill and the wind is pushing you back. I know I'm not talking to y'all, don't have those kind of problems. Y'all got it good. Y'all got it easy. Life is just easy. I mean, silver spoons and 780 credit score, and y'all got it. But to the handful of people who know what I'm talking about, sometimes life can press you in, and sometimes we can forget, well, God knows what I'm going through. He knows it. And sometimes we wonder, well, why, God, if you know what I'm going through, why am I going through it? Won't you stop it? And those are questions that are quite normal to ask. But then another question, another thing to consider is the trying of your faith. How are we going to maneuver while we're waiting on God to show up? So I'm going to give Samson some props, because I can't, I got a lot of things. If I could have a talk with Samson, I would ask him a lot of questions, but I'm going to give him some props now. I'm going to say Samson is depending on the Spirit of God to show up mightily. But watch this. I'm not thinking Samson is schizophrenic, but I am saying that his faith wavers. Now, the Spirit of the Lord comes upon him mightily. He breaks loose from the ropes, but then he turns around and violates the Nazirite vow. Anybody see that? What does verse 15 say? He found a fresh jawbone of a donkey. Now, Samson wasn't supposed to touch nothing dead. Y'all remember that? But here's Samson. Okay, I'm gonna rely on the Lord to get me out of the jam. And then as soon as I get out of the jam, I'm gonna go back to my selfish ways. How many times do people say, Lord, get me up off this sick bed? If you get me up off this, Lord, get me out of this jam. Lord, if you deliver me from my enemy, Lord, if you just take away this problem, after this, Lord, I'm really gonna serve you. And then we turn around and forget the promise we made. Samson took a Nazirite vow. Now, I do want to say this about Samson. Well, let me show you what he did, and then I'll come back and talk about Samson. Verse 15, he found a fresh jawbone of a donkey, so he reached out and took it. I mean, he had to touch the dead animal, and the animal, it's a fresh jawbone, had not been dead long, and he killed 1,000 men with it. So on I got a little picture up here of this jawbone. Now, the jawbone of this donkey wasn't brittle, so that's why I'm saying the donkey had to be dead. He had to be wasn't dead long, because the longer the corpse, the more brittle the bone would be. So this is a freshly dead donkey. But Samson had to have a whole lot of power, because y'all know how big donkeys are and how big a jawbone of a donkey would be. But watch this. This is one of the points that I wanted you to take away with. What happened to Samson? He had godly parents. I'm just going to kind of let that soak in. What happened from the time that this angel of the Lord appears to Samson's mother, appears to Samson's father and mother? Samson is miraculously born. Samson has the Nazirite vow. And here's the difference with the Nazirite vow. Anyone could take the Nazirite vow, but normally the Nazirite vow would be for a period of days, 30 days, 60 days. The yoke is put on Samson to be a Nazirite for the rest of his life. That may be the problem. That may be one of the problems. Well, I can be holy for 30 days. I can make an effort for 60 days. But if you're asking me to be separate for the rest of my life, I'm going to struggle with that. But I'm also thinking about Samson is raised, it appears, in a godly home. What happens to our children? What happens to them when they're raised with godly parents? You bring them to church, and then they compromise the commitment, or they compromise what they've been taught. Y'all talk back to me now, because here's a classic case. Samson's mother had to take the Nazirite vow while she was pregnant with Samson. Samson can't touch it. He can't eat any grapes. He can't eat raisins. He can't cut his hair. Can't touch anything dead. And so Samson would only know that because his parents taught him that. So what happens to our young people? Why is it that they can grow up in the church, and then when they get grown, they go their separate ways? I'm just trying to get us to think, what happens? I'm going to tell you what happens. I'm going to tell you what happens. Can I tell you what happens? What happens is when they get to the age of being an emerging adult, that's age 18. And sometimes that's from 18 to 24. And it was interesting. Our young people are trying, a sister wants to start a young adult ministry. So I asked, so what's the age? She said 18 to 26. That's a interesting age, because that's the emerging, they are emerging as adults. At 18, if you graduate from high school, or at 18, you're old enough to live on your own. You graduate high school. Some go to college. Some go to the military. Some just get a job. And some do nothing, all right? But they're 18 and they're grown. Can we think back to when we were 18? At 18, I went off to college. But when I look back of going off to college, I'm away from home, and that becomes a problem. Y'all don't want to tell on yourself, but that becomes a problem. But not only am I away from home, which means when I was home, I would come home at a reasonable time, because I didn't want to disrespect my grandmother. I didn't want my grandmother worrying about, where's Michael? Where's my grandson? And I didn't want to hear my grandmother's mouth if I came in late. Are y'all with me? My grandmother, bless her soul, there were some words she would say to me that would hurt me worse than a whooping. And I would, there were times when I wish that grandma would just would have whooped me, instead of saying, you ain't listening now, but you gonna wish you had listened to me. Oh man, grandma, don't say nothing like that. Then grandma would say things, come here, boy, make haste, make haste. I mean, I was moving too slow to do what I do. Then when I was real young, she'd tell me to go get switches off the tree. And then I come bring a little teeny weeny switch. And she said, go get some more switches, you know. But when you're 18, you're away from home and you have independence. Now, again, see, I'm talking to the cream of the crop. See, I'm talking, folks. Y'all, when y'all left home, you didn't give nobody nothing to worry about. But to those of us who did, I'm in college. I don't have to, I can stay out as late as I want to. You know, I went to a party school. And that meant on Friday and Saturday, there's going to be a party on campus. And I'm old enough to go to the liquor store and buy the liquor. I don't have to pay nobody on the street to go get it for me. Y'all don't know what. Sister Kim, nobody knows what I'm talking about, okay? They don't know about those days, you know, in high school days, you could give a guy who was old enough to go to the liquor store. You couldn't go to the liquor store, but you paid a guy to go to the liquor store and he would get the liquor for you. Well, you're emerging. And part of the problem, I think, with emerging adults is they experience that freedom. Okay, I can make my own decisions. And sometimes they're rebelling against what they've been taught. And then other times they are being influenced by other emerging adults. And sometimes they are around more emerging adults who don't know the Lord or who were not taught to know the Lord like they were. Am I making some sense? And what happens is, and that's why I push for Christian education. Not saying that if your child goes to a Christian school, there won't be problems at a Christian school, but you want to reduce the risk as much as you can. So I'm at this party school, Ain't nobody on campus a member of the church. And so I'm going to do what they do, because I'm not strong enough in my faith not to do what they're doing. That's part of the reason that we lose our young people. So some of the things we lose them. And then sometimes they are rebellious. But if truth would be told, our young people, and this is Samson's problem, stops listening to what they've been taught. They think they know, and you can't tell them anything. They find out the hard way. And then we can think, and then by the grace of God, sometimes our children come up and they don't have the Samson problem. They don't rebel. They stay with the Lord. But I don't know. Samson has this rebelliousness in him. He knew better. He had been taught. He was a Nazarite. But Samson is feeling himself. He's into his own feelings, and he just keeps compromising. So he took the jawbone of the donkey. He reached out, took it. Well, he found a fresh jawbone of a donkey. He reached out and took it. He actually stretched out his hand. He had to touch this donkey to get the jawbone. And he killed 1,000 men with it. Then watch what Samson does. He starts to mock the Philistines with this little poem. This is a Hebrew poem, in a sense. With the jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps. And what he's really talking about is the heap of men, the heap of Philistines. I took a jawbone and I put men on top of one another. With the jawbone of a donkey, I have killed 1,000 men. All right. So he's talking about two heaps. He's talking about being smitten or smiting them with the jawbone of a donkey. That's really what Samson is doing here. It's sort of a poem, but it's also like a mockery as well. Now, when he had finished speaking, he threw the jawbone from his hand and he named the place Ramoth Lehi, and which really means Jawbone Hill. He called the place Jawbone Hill, or the high place of the jawbone. He's calling it that because that's a significant event takes place. Now, just keep watching how Samson flip-flops, all right? We gave him credit for having enough faith in God to break loose from the ropes. But then he turns around and he takes the jawbone of the donkey, breaks the Nazarite vow. Now Samson is like a teeter-totter. He's like a teeter-totter, up and down, up and down. This is the only time so far that we find Samson praying to the Lord. This is the first time that up until this point, I don't read anywhere where Samson asked God to intervene. He didn't ask God to intervene when he saw the Philistine woman. He didn't ask God to intervene when he came back and found out that she had been given to another man. He did not ask God, what do you think I need to do before he burned the fields with the jackals? He did not ask God what to do when he took the jawbone. But watch what he asked God for. Ask what he, look at what he asked God for. Everybody see it? Verse 18, then he became very thirsty. Y'all see that? All right. Samson, he's not concerned about his mom and daddy. He became very thirsty. Let me just read the text. And he called to the Lord and said, you have given this great deliverance by the hand of your servant. All that is true. And now shall I die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised. What, anybody got any thoughts about Samson? Samson, he's so, his ego is all about him. Right now, it's all about him. You know, well, I gave him credit for protecting the tribe of Judah, but then he turns around and he touches the donkey, gets the jawbone. He kills the 1,000 Philistines, but now he's very thirsty. I guess after that battle, killing 1,000 men, yeah, it wore him out. And then he said, now, and he realized, and let's give Samson, but he's just teeter-tottering. He's just always up and down. He didn't take credit for the victory. He said, you have given this great deliverance by the hand of your servant. At least he acknowledged that he won the battle because God gave him the strength. But now he says, shall I die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised? Okay. But God split the hollow place that is in Lehi so that water came out of it. When he drank, his strength and the Spirit of the Lord came back. His strength returned and he revived. Therefore, he named it, and I cannot pronounce that word, Echakor, which is in Lehi to this day. And then chapter 15 closes on a good note. So he judged Israel 20 years in the day of the Philistines. Okay. All right. You see how his faith teeter-tottered, just up one day, down the next. How do we get to a point, brothers and sisters, where our faith levels? That's the thought question that I want you to give some consideration to. How do we get an even keel, you know? And then the second thing that I want to give, what can be done so that our young people remain faithful to the Lord? What can we do? The parents tried. They tried their best. Samson, don't marry that woman. Don't no, Samson, don't do that. Oh, please don't do that. But what can we do? You know, what kind of things can parents do? And then at what point do we I want to say let go, but I don't mean give up. But at what point do parents, how can I say it? At what point are parents not held responsible? Because Samson's parents seemed to do the right thing, but Samson's mind was made up. Now I hear people saying, and I'm going to digress a little bit. One of our visitors that came, she has a 13-year-old daughter, and she was telling us yesterday, she said, my daughter is going to be coming to Sunday school, to y'all Sunday school. And I took that like, okay, she wants to make sure that her daughter, and here's a plug for our teachers, our teachers, because we're praying for an increase in our Sunday school. We believe God hears our prayers. He's going to answer that. May not be an enormous number, but if we build a little at a time, we'll get there. She wants to make sure that her daughter, oh yeah, my daughter's coming to Sunday school. And I took it like, well, she go to regular school and get a public education. I'm gonna bring her to church school so she can get a spiritual education. I'm gonna make sure of that. Anybody with me? That's important to me. But what can we do? Now, as we close out, we had a lot of young kids from 87 to 2001, and then I'm going on that record. And there's a lot of competition. So our kids go to school 5 days a week, and then the school offer programs. There's athletic programs, and there's choirs, there's other events that schools offer. Then there's the prom, then there's band and all of that. And all of that is good. All of that can be good. Some of that can be good. But our kids are involved in that 5 days a week. And then there's peer pressure along with that. Then there's events like Halloween. And I remember we didn't honor Halloween per se, but we would have activities like a Bible character night. So our kids could come here and, not have to go out in the streets or anything like that. Y'all remember that? Okay. Even with the youth rallies, and I'm talking about the competition, we would have boat rides, the Annabelle Lee. Y'all remember that? And our kids could dress up. Well, maybe some church kids don't want to go to the prom. Maybe some church kids decide prom ain't for me. Prom don't do nothing for me, but I want to dress up. So we would have activities, and our activities, we wasn't trying to compete with what the world provided, but we wanted some activity that church folk could fellowship with. And I think that that's important. So to help keep kids on the beaten path, the straight and narrow, there has to be some fellowship in the body. There has to be some good fellowship. And sometimes even talking like this, it goes in one ear, it goes out the other ear. We don't see how important church is. We don't spiritual activities. We think, well, I can teeter-totter. No, don't teeter-totter. Let's get to a point where, hey, I'm a Christian. I'm glad to be a Christian. My parents raised me a certain way. I want to meet somebody who has the same values that I have. I don't want to be compromising what I have to do. So one thing that, as I looked at this, and we're not finished, we'll get into chapter 16 next week. But as I look at the life of Samson, some kind of way he digressed from his upbringing. And I would say he probably would have been worse if he did not have godly parents. But even with godly parents, there's still a battle. There's still a challenge. It's still an uphill battle. But we find Samson just vacillating, teeter-tottering with his faith. Anybody got any questions about chapter 15? Any thoughts? Any questions? Anything?
We say that all the time. It's not about us, but it's about him. And I think we see that a lot in the Samson story. It wasn't about Samson, it was about the Lord. It was what Samson could do, what he could do, and even though he didn't have the faith that he should have had. But this particular, I like to say this, is surely the curious aspect of Samson's story is why God chose him as a deliverer at all. Surely there were more faithful candidates. The good news, however, is that God does not revoke his gift when his people fail. He accomplishes his purpose through Samson at times in spite of his flaws, and at times even through him. God works much more smoothly with people of great character whose heart reflects his nature, but he can still work through those who wrestle against him every step of the way. No matter how carelessly a person abuses God's promise, and no matter how many lessons of the promise are forfeited in the process, God nevertheless finds ways to fulfill it. So, God worked through Samson, even though he had flaws, but it wasn't about Samson. It was about him and what he was doing through Samson.
So what about God was doing through Samson? Yeah. Okay, that's a good point. Sometimes we have private conversations, and it says the gifted folk are not always godly. Some of the people who had some of the most charismatic people have some character flaws, and then it's a challenge sometimes to kind of see between the charisma and the character. And sometimes people get caught up in the charisma and they don't get the content of what a person is doing. Yeah, and I think back in chapter 14, when it talked about Samson, that was the point that was made, that even though Samson was doing these things, God is going to use all of this. He's going to use it, you know. So he was a man of faith who wasn't faithful, but God used him to do some great things. All righty, okay. Let me read this to you again. I'm just trying to help us with approaches. You know, when we talk to people who are not, maybe they're unchurched, maybe they're looking for a new church, maybe it's someone that you just come in contact with and y'all just have general conversation. Here's another approach. Will you come be my guest for Sunday services at Arlington Road Church of Christ? I would love to have you. Perhaps you are a friend of mine, but as of yet, have never shared in a time of worship and praise with me. Let tomorrow be the day. God has a word for us, and praise and prayer will go up before the Father. Service begins at 10:15 a.m. I pray you will come be with us. Doesn't that sound real kind? I mean, you know, now how would a person respond? Now, if someone asked me that, you know what I would say? I just love my church so much. That's how I would respond. And you know what? What else I would say? My preacher preached so good, I hate to miss hearing him preach. Okay. I told you that's what a lady told me was on the job. I was trying to get her to come. She said, I don't mean no harm. James, well, my preacher preached so good, I just hate missing his service and everything. I said, ain't nobody never told me that they said that about me, but I'm gonna share it with my people. And I've been sharing it ever since. And then I always said, when she told me that, it made me want to hear. Her preacher was on TV, and it made me want to hear him. Who is this man that preached so good that she never want to miss his service? And I tuned him in. I said, oh, he all right. He ain't rock my world or nothing like that, you know. I probably should have went back and told her that. He all right, but there's some other preachers out there. But this is not intrusive, and I just think that if we could put that in practice, God will bless us. I appreciate that, and again, let's keep Sister Rice in prayer, and let's remember about how we can disciple people and keep them coming until the Lord opens their heart.